and that the Bolshevik Party would successfully lead it. That next would be Germany, then France, then Italy.
In the ferment after the First World War, others tried to follow the Bolshevik example. In Berlin, communists tried to seize power. In Munich, they succeeded briefly. In Hungary, a Soviet republic lasted several months. But the successes were short-lived. Communist uprising was crushed. And back in Russia, the communists had to fight for their own survival in a vicious civil war against supporters of the old regime. By 1921, the communists were victorious. But the party that claimed to speak for the people had never had majority support. Lenin had created a large secret police force to kill and terrorize his opponents. After the Civil War, the communists tried to win over the people. They became masters of modern propaganda. From the wagons of special agitprop trains, party workers acted out political dramas. On the trains, many Russians saw movies for the first time with an optimistic message about the future. Posters put across the central ideas of communism, as conceived by the 19th century German Karl Marx and adapted by Lenin. At the heart was the idea of class struggle. In the past, the capitalists had exploited the downtrodden workers. Now, the proletariat was to take control. In the factories, workers' representatives would make the decisions. The idea of profit would be abandoned. The fruits of their labor would be hospitals, housing, and schools. And it would be for Communist Party members, the true believers, to lead the way to this radiant future. Mikhail Minlin was working in a Moscow factory.
Не надо было говорить особенные слова.
We didn't need special words. We weren't going to discuss the theory of building communism.
Только личный пример.
Setting a personal example. We considered this the most important thing in all our work, in the Komsomol and in the factories. So people would say, look, that must be a communist. Why? Well, look how he's working.
Почему? Потому что вон, смотри, как работает.
Russia's peasants, 80% of the population, were the least well off in the new society. Thanks to the revolution, many now farmed land taken from the landowners. But their living standards were well behind the rest of Europe. Few were literate, but in 1920, the new government decreed that all Soviet citizens were to be taught to read. Teams of young activists were sent to the country.
We went from house to house in search of illiterate people. We made a note of their names. We then found suitable rooms to hold classes in.
Learning to write would open new doors for those trapped at the bottom of society. One woman who couldn't attend classes because of her child at home was helped by Anastasia Denisova.
Я сказала, что вот тебе учебник, вот будешь заниматься, я буду к тебе приходить.
I said, here's a textbook for you. I'll come to you so you can learn to read at home.
Она держит, одной рукой держит.
I remember vividly that when the baby cried, she carried on writing with one hand while she rocked him with the other.
Она желанием занималась. Это же
She was so keen to study. I'll always remember her striving for knowledge and enlightenment. It was immense.
Просто-напросто была огромная.
To produce engineers and technicians for the new society, training was expanded. And the communists said women should have equality with men, with equal pay. Ella Shishtir was one of a new generation of women.
Когда Ленин сказал, стране нужна электрификация, а коммунизм это советская...
When Lenin said that communism is Soviet power plus electrification, I decided that I should become an electrical engineer, that was my holy duty. And I didn't want to just draw up plans, I wanted to build an electric power station. That was my mission, and I achieved it.
Она давала мне...
The revolution gave me the right to feel equal to any man. It gave me the right to work, to study what I wanted to study.
Она давала мне право трудиться, учиться так, как я хочу.
The 1920s saw an explosion of new thinking in every field. Architects designed public buildings that broke with bourgeois styles. And musicians experimented too. Izo Dekja was part of a bold experiment that took the idea of equality to new heights. He played in a special Moscow orchestra in which the musicians were so equal that no conductor was needed. To achieve this solidarity and harmony, the musicians sat facing one another.
В начале революции, когда произошло, было очень тяжело жить.
Life was very hard for musicians at the beginning of the revolution. The conductors didn't treat them well at all.
Сейчас тоже есть такие. Лев Моисеевич говорил.
But the founder of the orchestra said that it was the musician who mattered, and that he should liberate himself from the fetters of the conductor.
Он должен освободиться от пут дирижера.
In the first symphony orchestra without an oppressive leader, musical decisions were made collectively.
Что-то не понравилось кому-то.
If you didn't like something, you all had a vote.
Если не слышны были, скажем, кларнеты.
For instance, if you couldn't hear the clarinets, you told them the truth. You're behind. You're not coming in on time. Or you have to play this bit like this.
Давай, вот это место надо играть так. Кто за, кто против.
Who's in favor? Who's against? This wouldn't happen in an orchestra with a conductor. It was a real innovation.
But despite all the talk about equality, the Russian masses did have a conductor who directed everything, and it was Lenin. By the time he died, he had created a one-party, one-ideology state, and an elaborate system of control. But Lenin had not achieved all the goals of communism. His successor, Joseph Stalin, inherited a society in which much of the old Russia survived. Large sectors of the economy were still in private hands. Peasants were still able to sell the produce they farmed in the markets. But Stalin was determined to make the state the sole economic power. He launched the first 5-year plan to centralize and modernize the economy.